back by popular demand. It is your one and only host, Eddie Valiant, here with the 4th edition of Eddie Valiant's Hot Take. That's right. It is so in demand that even my co-hosts on 5 Star Wrestling Podcast were wondering when the next Eddie Valiant Hot Take was going to come. To be perfectly honest with all of you, though, the real reason there hasn't been an Eddie Valiant's Hot Take in quite some time is because even though there are things to talk about, I feel that on 5 Star Wrestling Podcast, we pretty much covered those, and I pretty much gave my opinion on some of the things. But there's just a lot in wrestling to talk about, and especially with the WWE, there's just a ton. But I want to get some of the formidable things out of the way, right? The things that we have to go through in the beginning of these or the end of these, whichever comes first. You can follow 5 Star Wrestling Podcast on Twitter at the number 5 _ Star Podcast. That's right. You type it out, the number 5 _ Star Podcast. You can also follow the show on Facebook at 5 Star Wrestling Podcast. You spell out 5. It's 5 Star Wrestling Podcast. That's also the same for Instagram. And all you got to do is go on YouTube and look us up. 5 Star Wrestling Podcast is on YouTube. You can also follow yours truly on Twitter at Eddie Valiant 82. Again, that's Eddie Valiant 82. I'm on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on a lot of things. But anyways, it is time to get into the stuff that matters. This is Eddie Valiant's Hot Take number 4.
And now, here's 5 Star Wrestling Podcast Eddie Valiant with Eddie Valiant's Hot Take.
One of the first things I want to talk about is the elephant in the room, so to speak. It's the Undertaker versus Goldberg match. Now, I shouldn't be wasting a lot of my breath on such a shitty match, right? Because let's be honest with each other, okay? Despite all the factors, all right? Let's forget all the factors. Let's forget that it was 110 degrees out. Let's forget the fact that Goldberg is an idiot who smashes his head on a door, okay, before every match, probably giving himself a concussion either at that point or at the point when he nailed the steel post, cracking his own skull open. Okay, let's forget all of that. Let's also forget the fact that these guys are old as hell. I mean, Goldberg is 52 years old. The Undertaker's 54. These guys with their combined ages are 106 years old, right? This is a match that happened 10 or 15 years, I want to say, too late, right? And I get the WWE, they were salivating at the chance to have two of the biggest icons of their eras, right? You know, obviously the Undertaker was WWE and Goldberg was WCW, right? But it fell flat on its face. And unfortunately, I hope that this is not the last time that we see the Undertaker in the ring, because I would hate for that to be his last performance in the WWE, that is for sure. But one of my other gripes about this match is the fact that I was never a fan of Goldberg. I wish we had been doing this podcast around the time of WrestleMania 33 and even before that, you know, like pre-Royal Rumble of that year, because you would have heard my opinion and how much I hated the fact that Goldberg was a part of that storyline. I hated the fact that Kevin Owens had to drop the Universal Championship to Goldberg only to drop it to somebody worse in Brock Lesnar, right? God, imagine that. It was WrestleMania 33. We just had WrestleMania 35 not too long ago. Nevertheless, you would have heard how much I really disliked Goldberg. And I want to thank a couple of people right now. First, I want to thank a guy who is who I met at a Beyond Wrestling show, who is a follower of the podcast and follows us on Twitter as well. I want to thank the Chubby Behemoth, right? Brian, you're out there. You know who I'm talking about. And I want to thank him for sharing something on Twitter from somebody else that I want to thank. And that somebody else is Mr. Matthew Riddle. That's right, Matt Riddle, the bro, okay, who went on, I believe it's another podcast. It could be another radio show. It could be something like that. But he went on to say, I was never a fan of Goldberg in the beginning when everybody was like, oh, he's good, or he's so good. I was like, no, he's terrible. He's hurting people and there's nothing else. He also mentions in the interview, like, why, Goldberg's matches were only 3 minutes, 4 minutes. It's because he was terrible. And it's true. Goldberg was always terrible. I was the only guy, I think, back in high school, because when the Attitude Era was happening, I was in high school. That's how goddamn old I am. So get over yourself, Josh, if you're listening. Or Devin, one or the other. But even back then, I kept telling people I don't understand why people are such fans of Goldberg. Like, I don't get it. Goldberg was a terrible wrestler, and he always was a terrible wrestler. Okay? He was a poor man's Stone Cold Steve Austin. The guy could literally do 2 moves, right? He either speared you or gave you the jackhammer. And that's literally it. He was a one-trick pony. And always will be. And it's a shame that a one-trick pony is in the WWE Hall of Fame. Okay? A guy that I never liked and never agreed with. And that's just a fact. That's just how I feel about Bill Goldberg. And Riddle's right, man. This guy is terrible. Look what he did. He smashed his head again against his door. Comes out. He's already busted open. God forbid. God knows if he's already got a concussion at that point. If not, he definitely got one after hitting the post. And certainly busting himself open, and then therefore botching the hell out of his match. And I mean, yeah, granted, he's not the only one to blame, because The Undertaker also botched some moves, but, what do you expect? So I don't get this phenomena with Bill Goldberg. I don't. And really, that's all I want to say about Bill Goldberg, because I can't stand wasting another breath on that guy. And if you ask me, Gilberg was a hell of a lot better than Goldberg any day. Also, with that being said, would I ever want to see Goldberg versus The Undertaker 2? The simple answer to that question is absolutely frigging not. Okay? We got the match. We saw what happened. We're good. Okay? Lay it to rest. No pun intended. Sorry, Undertaker. But I don't want to see that match ever again. I want to make a brief comment right now about the WWE and its product, because I feel that you guys may think that I'm trying to convince myself that a war is going to happen between WWE and AEW, and that's not what I want. What I do want is for AEW to force WWE to better its product, because more wrestling is just better for all of us. That's what I say. For wrestling fans everywhere, don't you want more wrestling? And more great wrestling, that is. Right? So I'm just hoping that AEW forces the WWE to just step it up week in and week out, because they're going to have to. I mean, how many of you guys are actually excited for WWE Stomping Ground? I mean, I know I'm not. A lot of it looks like rematches from WWE Super Showdown. And I sure as hell could care less about Baron Corbin facing Seth Rollins, right? And I know on Monday night they got a Fatal 5-Way to decide Samoa Joe's challenger, and that is the match that I'm focusing on the most, because I want to see Samoa Joe versus Braun Strowman. Or how about Samoa Joe versus Cesaro? Or how about Samoa Joe versus even Bobby Lashley or even Ricochet? Any one of those matches sounds amazing. Sorry, Miz. I just want to see those guys go up against Samoa Joe before you do. I think a lot of them have more of a viable chance of winning against Samoa Joe than you do. Nevertheless, most of us are just robotic drones that are probably going to watch it anyways. Because unfortunately, that's what we do, especially if you pay for the WWE Network. You're like, damn it, I guess I'm going to be watching WWE Stomping Ground. I'm going to have nothing else better to do on a Sunday. Hint, hint, other companies somewhere out there, please put on a show better than that one. Please. With that being said, I want to do something special for all of you guys, considering I've made you wait probably like 3 weeks maybe since the last Eddie Valiant's hot take. I want to go back in a time machine and check out an interview that I did back in 2012. To give a little information on it, I was, I believe, a senior in college. I was going to Bridgewater State University, and they had a event that was going on in the gymnasium, and it was being done by PWF Northeast, I believe was the name of the company. And at the time, Brutal Bob Evans was teaming up with Mike Bennett. And for those of you who don't know who Mike Bennett is, that is Mike Kanellis of the WWE. So I had heard that several people at my school were doing interviews with various wrestlers. And at the time, I'm going to be honest, I was pretty ignorant, okay? I wasn't following independent wrestling at the time. So I had seen pictures of Mike Bennett, and I only knew Mike Bennett because I loved Maria Kanellis. So essentially, that was the only reason why I knew who Mike Bennett was. Other than that, I had no idea who he had wrestled, what group he was in, nothing. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about the person I was interviewing. And I'm being honest with you guys 100% right now. And I'm, believe me, I'm going to explain. So I was asked to do an interview. They had one last interview. Somebody wanted to back out. I don't know why. They just didn't feel like interviewing this guy. I don't remember what the deal was. And they asked me to interview Brutal Bob Evans. So I'm like sitting there like, okay, I have no idea who this guy is. And I'm trying to look him up. I'm trying to find as much research as I can at the time about who he was. And yeah, you're going to figure out that I'm pretty independent wrestling ignorant in this interview. So I want to take the time, and hopefully Bob gets like a ping or something and he somehow listens to this, because I want to apologize, first of all, to Brutal Bob Evans for being ignorant. And you can tell in the beginning of the interview that he's staying in character. And I kind of figured that that's what was going to happen. And I was trying kind of my best to get him out of character. I didn't feel like talking to the character Brutal Bob Evans. I wanted to talk to Bob Evans. So again, Brutal Bob, if you're out there, I apologize for this interview. And this was technically my first ever interview that I ever did in studio. And before this, now, another thing I have to get off my chest and let you guys know that at this time, I had been used to interviewing Playboy Playmates. I had been interviewing 80s rock stars like Michael Sweet of Stryper, Wolf Hoffman of Accept. So I had literally no experience interviewing wrestlers or athletes or whatever. So that's another thing you have to kind of take into consideration. And they had literally dumped this interview on me a half hour before it was going to happen. They saw me on campus. They asked me if I had time. I said, yeah, I've got time. And they said, well, don't leave. Like, we need you to interview this guy, Brutal Bob Evans. And so I did it. And I'm going to present it to you guys today. It's my interview at WBIM, which is Bridgewater State University Radio. This is from, I believe it was October or November of 2012. So I was getting ready to graduate because my semester was almost over. And for me, it's a cringeworthy interview in the beginning. I really hope that by giving you this to you guys that you learned something a little bit about the industry. I tried to get the lowdown as much as I could on the industry itself. And I'm kind of glad that I got to interview Brutal Bob. He was a great guy, a class act, a legend in the indies. So without further ado, that is all for me today as far as Eddie Valiant's hot take. So now let's go and check out my interview with Brutal Bob Evans.
All right, we're stopping the song here because we got something special going on right now. And if you live in the Bridgewater area, obviously you know at the John J. Kelly Gymnasium here at Bridgewater State University, there is a special event going on. It's being put on by PWF Northeast Pro Wrestling. It is Crimson Carnage 2, and I have a very special guest in the studio with me. It is Brutal Bob. What is going on?
How you doing? Good to see you. I hope everybody comes out tonight and sees. You just mentioned to me off air that you didn't know who I was. You didn't see me on any website. Let me tell you, my friend, 21-year veteran, a man who has done just about everything in wrestling, been all over the world, every country you can think of, some countries you haven't thought of.
Yeah.
And tonight, myself and the prodigy Mike Bennett, since you've been mumbling all over yourself, you haven't quite figured it out yet, we'll be taking on the tag team champions, and we'll be walking away the tag team champions. And that's somebody who's from UMass Dartmouth, one of the better colleges around here, way better than Bridgewater State. I had a chance to go to Bridgewater State, but unfortunately I woke up from that nightmare and I went actually to UMass Dartmouth. So we'll keep that personal stuff aside and we'll talk more about tonight.
All right, so let's get into it. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. I told you, 21-year veteran. I'm from Swansea, Massachusetts. I've been hanging and banging in the streets of Providence, Rhode Island. I've wrestled in the World Wrestling Federation, World Wrestling Entertainment, Ring of Honor, one of the biggest companies in the nation right now. And most of the time, I'm a corner man for my man, the prodigy Mike Bennett, the man who's going to be a future world champion, the man who's going to be one of the biggest national stars in the country. He dates a Playboy. I don't know if you've heard of the lady,
Maria Kanellis. Yep.
A Playboy supermodel, a wrestling diva. The classiest lady around here who couldn't even be bothered to show up tonight, which is probably for the best, get all these college kids drunk or outraged or whatever and trying to keep their paws. I'd have to knock them away too.
Yeah.
But tonight it's going to be myself and the prodigy Mike Bennett, a future world champion, a man who flies in from Hollywood every once in a while to grace the old country. He's from down the street. He's from down 44 East in Carver, Massachusetts. Now he's in a real state, a real city, Los Angeles, California, and now he's going to come down, win the tag team titles, bring them to Hollywood, and make us all famous.
I got to ask you, when you're getting ready for a fight, how do you prepare yourself, like physically and mentally, for a wrestling match?
Well, how do I prepare myself? PWF Northeast is one of the top local promotions around here, and local's probably a little small-minded. They're more regional. They've pretty much traveled all over New England, and it's some of the best young talent and some of the best. I'm one of the more, like I said, one of the more veteran guys. I'm probably more towards the end of my career than the beginning, so it's actually tough to keep it up with some of these young guys. But what I do is I'm in the gym 4 or 5 times a week, a lot of functional training, a lot of kettlebells, a lot of Indian clubs, a lot of rope jumping. I got to do whatever I can to keep my cardio up, and I got to do whatever I can to keep these young guys in line, because that's really my reputation is one of these guys who punishes the young guys and gets them ready, because I've trained a lot of guys. I ran a pro wrestling school for years. And what I try to do is I try to get them ready mentally and physically to take them to the next level. And that's usually what happens with me is they face me, and win or lose, they usually go on to the better themselves. It's usually a good experience wrestling me. So.
Okay. When you're on the road, do you find it harder to keep up with the training schedule and everything when you're constantly traveling, constantly going from, one place to the other?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the good things about traveling with superstars such as Maria Kanellis and the prodigy Mike Bennett is we either get a limousine, a town car, or we get flown first class, so that helps. And we get in every gym in the country, so that's kind of easy for us. But yeah, finding the time to train between public relations and doing things for Ring of Honor or doing things for a group such as PWF Northeast, it's not easy, but you have to make the time, because this is pro wrestling is one of the hardest sports in the world. It's one of the hardest entertainment situations in the world. It's a little bit of everything. So you have to be, like I said, mentally and physically ready, and you also try to get your sleep. You can't be going out every night. That's one of the things we try to keep that in line. So that's not easy, but we get it done.
Okay. I got to ask you because, I've been looking into a lot of this. And obviously there's guys that are always trying to discredit, the athletic ability you guys have. And it's undeniable you guys have athletic ability to be in order to be doing this, night in and night out. Talk about, because injuries are as real as it gets in this business. Because I know a lot of you guys will wrestle through a lot of injuries. And how do you do it?
Really, it's a mindset more than anything. I truly believe once you get into this, your body kind of gets used to it a little bit of the shock and a little bit of the because I know several people have said every time you take a fall or every time you jump off the top rope and you fall to the mat, it's like being in a car crash at 15 miles an hour. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that quoted a lot, and it sounds about right the way it feels. But I think you have to have a certain mindset. I think you have to have a certain mental toughness. If you're going to sit out every time there's a little injury or there's a little something, a broken finger or a wrist or an ankle. I mean, I've had heel spurs in both feet. I've broken fingers on both hands, elbow injuries, back injuries, neck injuries. It all happens. We're all sore. We're all hurting, and I do it just on a part-time level. The guys who do it, regularly 250, 300 times a year, they just have to fight through it. And like I said, there's a lot of wellness issues now in the big leagues where you can't take all the painkillers and stuff, which is good for our industry. I'm happy about it. So you have to find different ways to manage the pain. So I know a lot of guys are getting into stretching, yoga, learning how to do pain management with icing and massage and things like that. So really all you have to do is it's part of our business. It's part of an investment in yourself. You're your own commodity. So anything you can do to preserve yourself is what you do. So you just do as much as you can to stay up on things and stay as physically ready as possible. But it is very demanding, and anyone who has a problem with what we do, or if they think we're a bunch of clowns, that's fine. I respect anybody's opinion on it, but if you haven't done it, your opinion really doesn't really hold that much water to me. It's like if I saw an opera singer, I'm not a big fan of opera, but I understand that there's a lot of skill and a lot of things that go into it. I'm not a classical pianist, but I see the years and years of training that it must take. I don't bury those people. I don't talk badly about those people because I can't do what they do. So basically, get in the ring, fall down a couple of times, tell us how phony our ring is, tell us it's a big trampoline. You won't be saying that after the first fall. Never mind the two or three that you might be brave enough to take after that.
Believe me, I have sat there, and I have a friend that's a pro wrestler.
Oh, cool.
And I've tried, I went to the gym with him or whatever, and I tried it out, and believe me, it's I wasn't doubting anything you guys say. It hurts.
No, it's the real deal, and it's that's one of the things that I think people don't quite realize, that it's been called entertainment, it's been called a bunch of different things, but there is quite a bit of a real element to it. So it's like anything else, I mean, we do have our secrets. We don't pull back the curtain as much as people think we do sometimes. But like I said, it's more real than you'd ever think, in my opinion. So, and I've done it. I've had thousands of matches. I've been around, like I said, over 20 years, and I've seen a bunch of injuries. I've seen injuries to myself. I've felt injuries to myself. I mean, I've seen, not personally, but I mean, we've all been part of people who have died in the ring, who have seriously injured themselves, broken necks, broken backs. I mean, it happens. So we had one of the guys last week on an event we were at in outside of Pittsburgh, and the guy almost broke 3 of his ribs, and it was one bad fall. So, and this is a guy who's been around as long as I have, so it's not some rookie that didn't know what he was doing. It's somebody, former Ring of Honor, former ECW world champion Steve Corino, and this guy smashed up his ribs, and this is a guy I'm wrestling in a couple weeks, and he has a rib injury, and he's still suffering with it. But again, the man that Steve Corino is, he's still going to take on that challenge in a couple weeks with me down the line. So that's, again, you talk about, working through the pain, there's one right there. So,
but is there ever a moment where you sort of say, maybe I need to not necessarily tap out for a minute, step back? When does it get to the point where it's okay, maybe I've had enough for now, and maybe I need to take a break? Does that come, or is it just sort of you know what, I've got to work through this, because obviously life is all about making bread?
Well, that's that happens just about after every match, or every bad practice, or every bad fall you take. I mean, this business can break your heart. I mean, you have to keep it in the right perspective. I'm fortunate. I have a nice wife at home. I have a couple of kids. I have a real life outside of wrestling. I didn't always have that, and I think that's really helped me balance my life and my career. Now I do this, and I have it in the proper perspective where I think I can tackle it the right way. But I've had my share of disappointments, I've had my share of successes. So I think you have to balance that. You have to keep it in the right perspective. Wrestling is a huge part of my life. It'll probably always be. It's my major passion. But there are other things in life too. So, but when I'm ready to leave, and I'm not ready to leave yet, but when I'm ready to leave, I'll leave on my own terms. As much as I can. Hopefully it won't be a serious injury or anything like that. I'm going to leave on my own terms, and at that point I'll be comfortable. I don't want to be one of these guys that wrestles because he has to. I want to wrestle because I want to.
One of the things, obviously the popularity of professional wrestling today is just, it's insane to think. Because I remember a time where it was almost, because I've been a lifelong fan of professional wrestling, and I remember there was a time you almost felt sort of like you were an oddity because you liked wrestling. Mm-hmm. What do you think contributed to the popularity of wrestling?
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point. I'm going to respectfully sort of disagree with you. I think what we're learning now is there were people who were fans back then, and they didn't necessarily admit it. Because we see, like, when a retro show comes on or a legend comes back to wrestle at WrestleMania or one of the big events, all of a sudden we turn on a whole bunch of new fans. So I think, not new fans, but people who come back and remember for the nostalgia, you know. And Hulk Hogan, I know he's suffered some controversy lately, but everybody knows Hulk Hogan. Everybody, when I bet people were surprised when Macho Man Randy Savage passed away, how much attention he got and how much respect he got, because there weren't a whole lot of people joking about him and all this. There were a lot of people that said, hey, I grew up, Jimmy Kimmel and Letterman and these guys who could have made some crazy jokes. They talked about what respect they had for it and how much he brought to them when they were younger. So I think wrestling has always been popular. I think it got brought into the national spotlight a little bit more because they're trying to clean it up and make it more family friendly. And I get that. But I think it's always been there, and I think now it's just a little more respected in certain ways. I don't know if people can actually respect the physical punishment we take, because with the concussion issues and stuff, I think that's always a tough sell to America, and I just saw something on football the same way. And we're dealing with that as an industry. We're trying to minimize that as much as possible. We're trying to keep guys out who have concussions, who have injuries. We don't want anyone to get any more hurt than they already are. But as far as, I think it's always been popular, and I think it's always been something where people didn't want to admit it. But now I think it's a little bit more, you see kids talking. My son goes to, kindergarten, first, second grade. I see a lot of those kids, and they wear their John Cena stuff, and they talk about John Cena. He's the one they talk about the most, but you see some different guys out there, and it's not as popular as, baseball or football, but it's also not, people don't roll their eyes and go, what are you watching that junk for anymore? So.
Well, but that's what I was talking about. I remember being in elementary school and sort of being like, oh, you watch wrestling? Mm-hmm. What the heck? And then all of a sudden getting into sort of junior high and high school, and all of a sudden everybody's wearing, the D-Generation X T-shirts to, whoever else. I just remember the spike, and it was always like, why has it become the mainstream? Because I always felt it was special to me.
Yeah,
because I loved wrestling.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think that late 90s period, I think there was a lot of stuff that people latched onto. I was a little older than you. I was in my mid-20s, but I think people latched onto it because it was cool. Anytime something is cool, people are going to jump on it.
Yeah.
South Park was around that time. A lot of stuff going on MTV, VH1 Behind the Music, all this stuff that's iconic now.
Yeah.
It made Steve Austin. It made The Rock. The Rock came back last year and still sold 1 million buys on pay-per-view. So, these guys still have drawing power, and he's one of the biggest action movie stars of all time. So,
I got to ask you a question about that, actually.
Sure.
Do you feel that it's a little unfair that he sort of steps out of wrestling and then can come back in main events at any time? Or do you feel he's paid his dues, he's that guy that can main event?
No, because if his name wasn't The Rock and his name was... I can't think of anybody, right? Ashton Kutcher. To say Ashton Kutcher wanted to be in, some big, huge Hollywood star, or Bruce Willis. Say Bruce Willis wanted to be in a match. nobody would say anything about Bruce Willis not being in one. I mean, it's the same thing. If a major motion picture star or a major star can come back and bring a spotlight to our industry, why should we care? Yeah, I understand that there have been guys working all year, but if they deserve the shot, they would get it. If they were ready to be put in that main event position, they would get it. And I know they're talking about a few different possible main events for WrestleMania, and one of them is either Rock versus John Cena or Rock versus CM Punk. And you have to look at it, and I think both guys deserve the shot with The Rock. But I'm not saying they should wrestle each other. I'm saying one guy should wrestle The Rock. I think Punk gets more out of it because Cena's already done it.
Yeah.
But, I think Punk's done a lot of hard work this year, and I think he deserves the shot. It's the same thing with Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar left the WWE.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
I mean, The Rock left on. The only problem he had was with Vince. He left on good terms with everybody else. Brock left and hated it. I remember the first thing he said was, "I don't want to live on vodka and painkillers anymore." So he took a shot at our business and he walked away. Like the rest of his life was perfect,
Yeah.
And got booed out of the building in Madison Square Garden at WrestleMania. And here's a guy who came back. Everybody wanted him to come back, and he drew more money on pay-per-views. How come nobody's complaining about Brock Lesnar? Because he can whip their ass?
Yeah, no, I know, and the whole legitimacy back to wrestling, type of
whatever.
deal.
I mean, it's like Punk cutting that interview last year where he, kind of pulled the curtain behind. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's anything that draws attention to our business where it's not, I hate to say it, somebody committing a crime or somebody getting busted or whatever, then to me is a positive. Anything that stirs up something in the national media that's good, like, hey, he said this crazy thing, or Brock Lesnar's coming back, or here comes The Rock, that's all good to me. There's still rumors swirling around that Steve Austin is thinking about a possible match. He says no, but there's always that rumor, and here's another guy who kind of is in the mainstream, everybody knows who Stone Cold is.
Yeah, and it's like never say never, right?
Never say never.
I got to ask you, because I looked you up, and I've seen you've wrestled with some impressive names that I pulled up. The man of a thousand holds, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn. Yep. I can't remember his real name, but Adam Bomb.
Adam Bomb, yeah, Brian Clark.
Brian Clark, thank you very much. And you've even wrestled guys that are coming up now,
sure,
like Damian Sandow.
I wrestled Damian Sandow when he was Aaron Stevens in his first WWF match in 2002.
Wow. So,
yeah, I remember that because he was very nervous, and we were in different parts of our career. I kind of knew that that's not what I wanted to do, and he was a young guy, really, a big, tall, good-looking kid. Because he's taller than I am. He's probably about 6'4" or 6'5". He's a really tall guy.
Yeah.
And at that point he had real long hair and still has a good physique and everything. Just a little different look to him. But he was a very talented guy, and he was very nervous. And I said, dude, it'll be fine. Just calm down. Just wrestle like we wrestle at the Lowell Elks Club in front of 150 people. And it was at the Dunkin' Donuts Center in front of 12,000. But
oh wow,
the pressure was off of me because I had a different goal, and I tried to do the best I could to keep the pressure off of him, and he did very well. And I know Aaron is Damian Sandow has always been very kind in saying that I helped kind of calm him down in that match. It wasn't like I did a million things for him, but he's always been very gracious to me about that. So, and then Perry Saturn I've known for years. Perry Saturn was one of the guys I broke in with, not a little bit after him, but I wrestled him in front of 39 people at the Hudson Lions Hall. So wrestling him at the Fleet Center was no different, So
yeah.
And Perry had a lot of respect for me because of the way I was brought up, because we were both kind of like old Kowalski guys. He was actually trained directly by Kowalski, and I was trained by one of Kowalski's first students. So we kind of had that connection. So he always kind of had a respect for me, and Perry and I were always very friendly. So, but man, he hits hard. So, and he has very little patience for people who aren't serious about our industry. I know that much. So,
which makes sense if you think about it, because if you're not serious about the business, why are you in it?
And Perry always had a real tough upbringing too. I know Killer Kowalski was very tough on him and very demanding of him and a lot of the guys. And I think he thought that maybe that next generation was a bit coddled, so he didn't have any time. He had time if you did it the right way, but if you didn't pay your dues, he didn't really have a lot of time for you. And if you had any arrogance, he dismissed you or beat you up.
All right. Because I was going to ask, like, what lessons did you get out of these guys in life and in wrestling?
Well, like I said, I mean, I was just a piece of meat for Adam Bomb. He was probably about as new in the wrestling as I was. He was pretty new. But as far as like some of the other matches, the guys were real nice. They let me get some moves in and get some offense in and make it look like I could actually hang with them. So they were, and like I said, Dean Malenko I didn't know him at all, but he was a good, very good technical wrestler, and Perry I had known for years, and so it's, my experiences in WWF and WWE have always been very good. It's just I didn't want to go out on the road. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. What am I going to do? Go out on the road every day? The money's good, but is it good enough to sacrifice your family? I like my schedule now where I'm on a national scale. I mean, Ring of Honor is seen by 1 million people every week. We're syndicated over about 30% of the country, and then the rest of the people can see us on the internet, ROHWrestling.com. Quick little plug there, but it's and there's a ton of people in it. Lance Storm, Matt Hardy's has wrestled for us.
The world's greatest tag team.
Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. Charlie Haas I've known for 15 years. I knew him when his brother Russ, God rest his soul, was wrestling in Delaware. And Charlie's big joke with me is I've known Bob since he had hair, because I'm bald, if the people don't know. But yeah, Charlie and I go way back, and and the Headbangers are there now, and it's a bunch of guys trying to do their bit to give back, and it's a good vibe. I go there, I wrestle on the weekends, and I go home to my family, and I get on TV, and people are nice, and like I said, I do kind of a trainer character there, but it's kind of me, because like I said, I ran a school for 10 years. That's what I did, so it's kind of my specialty. So I mean, I wrestle too, but teaching is what is my passion in wrestling. So.
Okay. I got a question. If somebody wants to get into wrestling, what advice do you have for somebody that wants to do this, for a living?
The biggest thing I can tell them, and this is something that I actually learned, I'm 40 now, and this is something I actually learned at 36. So first of all, don't learn the lesson at 36. Learn it at 19 or 20 or whenever you get in. Be in the best physical condition you can be. Before you go into wrestling, you should have muscles. You don't have to look like Dave Bautista, but you have to look like an athlete. You will not be taken seriously if you don't look like an athlete. Yes, you can point to Mick Foley and these guys; they're 1 in a million. And let's, Mick Foley is a special icon in wrestling that we won't see again for a long time. So, but you have to be in the best physical condition. You have to be in great mental shape. In other words, you have to be kind of hard-skinned. People are going to be tough on you, but you also have to deal with it, because that's the way it is. And it's also like the way I've been following a lot of stand-up comedians lately, because our businesses are pretty much the same. You're driving a long way to try to get 10 minutes somewhere, which may lead to something, it may not, in front of probably not that many people. But you have to just keep doing the deal. You have to just keep having matches. And then eventually, if somebody tries to take you under their wing, or you have a chance to wrestle in better places, one of my friends, Ryan Drew, who's actually an excellent trainer in the New England area, has a great way of putting it. He says, be the worst guy in every wrestling event you're on. And I think that's a great way of saying it, because you should always be trying to reach up rather than reach down. Better to be a small fish in a big pond and try to grow into it than a big fish in a small pond all the time. And I think that's one of the things that really hurts the regional guys trying to shoot for national stuff, is they're afraid to take that next step. I mean, we hold tryouts/seminars at Ring of Honor 2-3 times a year, and there's 30, 40 guys there from around the country trying to get a break. How come there are not 400 guys there? But that's always going to be, because there's always going to be 5 or 10% of the guys that really go for it, and then 5 or 10% out of that 5 or 10% are the ones that are really, really, really going to go for it, really go that extra mile. One of the guys who's on the event tonight, Vinny Marcellia, is one of the guys that I kind of mentor. He's a big idiot, but I still like him for some reason. But he wanted a match so bad in Ring of Honor. He said, if I can drive with somebody else, I'll drive 1,100 miles round trip if you let me have a match, a 5-minute match. And they respected him so much, and they liked him so much, they put him in there with Davey Richards, the former Ring of Honor world champion, who's probably one of the best wrestlers in the country. And the kid hung in there for 5.5 minutes. Oh, wow. So, okay. I mean, he lost, but he certainly, and Davey had nothing but great things to say about him after. So, but how many guys were in that line to drive 1,100 miles round trip to do it? It wasn't a big line.
Yeah, yeah.
But the kid got a break because he was willing to go quite literally that extra mile. So I think the biggest thing is you just have to hustle. And you have to just have that never say die attitude and realize that it's going to suck sometimes. Realize that you're going to hit a bunch of potholes, a bunch of bumps, and a bunch of stuff. And then eventually it'll work out for you if you keep going. Head down, move forward. That's what I always tell my guys. Head down, move forward. You cannot, it's an old statement by Neil Young. He still uses it. But head down, move forward. You can't do anything. They can't get at you if you just keep coming to them.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's my whole thing is you just have to keep moving. So.
Okay. So before we end this, I got to ask you, what can we look forward to tonight in the ring?
Well, you can look forward to, I think, like I said, PWF Northeast is one of the top wrestling promotions in this area. And I think there's a lot of young guys. There's a lot of guys who are, through all the trash talking that I've said, I don't like everybody on this event. I don't like everybody on the card, but it doesn't mean I don't respect them. It doesn't mean that they don't bring a lot of entertainment value, a lot of athleticism. I know it's not always easy to get a WWE ticket, and I know it's not always easy to travel to Providence or you guys are kind of in the middle here, Providence or Boston. It's still a 45-minute drive either way. So come here, 8 o'clock. Free food, right? Free food, free ticket to come in, right?
Yep.
This is the best deal in town. If I was a student here, I would go just because I know sometimes you guys are just, you guys seem to have a pretty happening place around here, but sometimes you just look for something to do, something to get, and then you go and you have, you go to your adult establishments afterwards,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's something cool. It's and like I said, these guys aren't pretenders. They aren't like little kids dressed up in big kids' clothes. These guys are legitimate athletes who are trying to. It's like going to see the Pawtucket Red Sox. You have respect for the Pawtucket Red Sox or the Brockton Rocks because they're trying to make it to the next level. These guys are going to show you the effort because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get to the next level, whatever it is for them personally, professionally. So.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much, Brutal Bob.
Absolutely.
And remember, tonight at 8 p.m. at the John J. Kelly Gymnasium, it is PWF Pro Wrestling Crimson Carnage 2. Check it out. It's free to all BSU students and faculty with a school ID. Thank you very much.